Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast, joined by Brian Neubert and Tom Dienhart, as I usually am, and appreciate hopefully always a good discussion. We'll look forward to that here today, hitting obviously on Purdue basketball, a little bit of football, etc. Want to also thank our sponsor, the Union Club Hotel, Brian Neubert. It's a big deal. He's going to be appearing with me at the Boiler Up Bar on March the 3rd. That's a Thursday night, 2 nights before the senior day in the Purdue Indiana game at 7 o'clock. It'll be also available on Facebook Live, so we'll have some discussion and have some fun with that. But we appreciate the Union Club and the Boiler Up Bar for their support. All right, Brian, we'll start with what will be the big story tomorrow, Purdue Rutgers, 5:30 p.m. Sunday, a Sunday game. Who would have thought that this game would mean so much maybe a month ago, but it does. And Purdue is still honing in on an opportunity to win a share of the Big Ten championship as they try to race to the wire. Looking at that game and trying to see what you see based on what we saw back in December, it's a whole different world. We understand that, but going to be an interesting game, and Rutgers is obviously playing extremely well.
Yeah, I think we all should have expected this to matter a lot for Purdue all along, because Purdue should be in the middle of the Big Ten championship race, but the Rutgers part of it is sort of the unforeseen part of it. That they are pretty hot. Obviously, they have played a ranked team every game for like a month and won every one of them. Ron Harper's hurt now. If it's me personally and I'm Purdue, I want Ron Harper to play, because I want to be challenged in that way. I want to exercise that demon, because that game back in December was, one of Purdue's real low points of the season. And I think Purdue's improved defensively here lately. And I think this would be a great test for them, because obviously you want to win the game. But I think you also want to be postseason ready here. And to be postseason ready, I think it would help Purdue from a defensive perspective to have to go against another one of these really high-end backcourt matchups that they've had so much trouble with. Obviously, you still have Johnny Davis ahead on the schedule one more time. So it's not like Purdue doesn't play any other good players other than Ron Harper the rest of the way. But I think that game against Rutgers back in December exposed some things from Purdue, obviously, that I think they required some time to get ironed out. I think they're on the right track. I think a day off probably really helped them. But I think that game was forever ago. I think Purdue's a different team. I think Rutgers is a different team. Rutgers is going to the NCAA tournament with the worst losses in the history of the event. I think that Purdue is going to put its best foot forward on Sunday, and I would be surprised if they don't have success.
Tom, when you look at that and you're looking at the grand scope of the NCAA tournament and how many Big Ten teams. Also, you and I are watching this from a little bit more afar, but the fact that now maybe 9 teams, and we're recording this at a time where I think the first round of seedings will be announced of where they are at this point in time. But a fascinating stretch, because you got Michigan that's played its way in. Maybe Iowa is still a favorite for whatever reason. They don't have any odd one wins. But they're still a team that maybe looks like they're in Indiana, maybe heading the wrong direction, but still in most people's brackets. But it's going to make for just a fascinating last 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun as these teams jockey down the stretch. The Big Ten, I always tell people you can win a lot of bar bets if you walked in and say, hey, when was the last time the Big Ten won the national championship in basketball? Yeah. Do you guys know?
2000 Michigan State, right?
The 1999, 2000 Michigan State Spartans. That's the last time the Big Ten's won a national championship. I'm not sure how you can explain that away. My son wasn't even born yet, and he's a junior in college. Think about that. So we'll see if the Big Ten can get the monkey off its back this year. They've had a lot of great teams go in and not do it. Purdue obviously maybe have its best shot yet. A lot of pressure. Pressure comes with the territory. People act like there's fatigue. Purdue has to take everybody's best shot. hey man, that comes with being a highly ranked team with high expectations. I thought that's what everybody wanted. That's what blue blood programs get, right? Every time Kentucky and Duke and those programs go out and play, they're the biggest game on everybody's schedule, and that comes with being a team with great expectations. It's something you got to deal with, and Purdue's, for the most part, done a real good job with that this year, I think. Still a ways to go, but I always say, too much is given, much is expected. And again, this is a Purdue program with a lot of talent, with a transcendent talent. And it's going to be fun to see how they finish down the stretch. It'd be fun to see them get at least a share of the Big Ten championship. I think they're going to probably have to win out to get it. I think that's doable. I think they can take care of business against Rutgers at home. Same with Indiana, but the road games in East Lansing and Madison are going to be interesting. But I certainly think Purdue can beat both those teams. I think the Badgers are overrated to a degree, and I think Michigan State's, so their wheels seem to be coming off and just not up to their usual pedigree. So I think it's a good chance for Purdue to win out. And I do think they probably are going to have to win out to at least get a share here. Maybe win it outright if they do that.
Yeah, Illinois, as we record, Illinois and Michigan State will be a teller, because I think obviously to win it outright, Michigan State or Illinois needs to lose again. Ohio State needs to lose again. Ohio State's got 5 out of 7 games at home. That's a big advantage. But yeah, it's and Brian, you've watched all these teams, seen them in person, looked at it. If you're Purdue, who are you looking at? Obviously, Purdue needs to handle its own business and win tomorrow, win Sunday against Rutgers, and take care of its own business. But of the teams that have you seen them all, looking at who does Purdue need to have its look out of at the corner of its eye and be aware of, at least for the Big Ten regular season's championship? Is it simple as Wisconsin because that's the team you're going to have to beat on the road, or how do you view that?
I think it's probably Wisconsin, just because their schedule lines up pretty favorably. I think they still have to go to Rutgers.
Yeah,
they still have Purdue, but they have them at home. I call Wisconsin overrated every year, but
yeah, you do.
I probably need to stop doing that, because if you're at some point you're not overrated if you have the same record every year. And I do think Purdue's the best team in the Big Ten. I think that I've thought that way from day one. I do think there have been issues for Purdue this year, maybe not handling success all that great. They are getting everyone's best shot for the most part. I think, though, that that's been a little bit of a process for Purdue, because they're not conditioned that way. I think, Tom said the word blue blood. Well, the kids who come up through Duke and Kentucky and, North Carolina and, on and on and on, the first time they step on a floor, they're exposed to that very dynamic. The majority of this team this year, the first time they stepped on a floor, there was nobody at their games.
Yeah.
This is not, and the seniors, they were never playing from the top of the heap. They were always kind of a good team prior to this year, but they weren't that team that, everybody had marked on their schedule. I do think, Purdue has, probably let a couple of opportunities slip away for that reason. I think this last stretch was really hard on them. I think for them to go 7-1 or whatever it was a real feat, even though the game in Ann Arbor was, obviously forgettable. I think everybody gets to suck every now and then. I think that's everyone's right. But I think Purdue just needs to be at its best right now. And I think there are some indicators of that happening. Purdue's been able to win some games without shooting the ball terribly well for 40 minutes. That's probably a backhanded thing to say, because you aren't your best if you're overcoming something you're not doing very well. But I think Purdue has been better defensively since Ann Arbor, even though I don't know if they've necessarily gotten credit for it in the court of public opinion. I think that they're in a pretty good spot right now, but you do have some really difficult games coming up here. I don't think Rutgers is going to be any pushover. I'd be astonished if Purdue lost that game at home. Purdue owes one to Rutgers big time. They've lost 4 in a row to Rutgers, including their last home game against Rutgers. I think the 2 road games, I think Michigan State's very beatable. I think Wisconsin's very beatable, but what Wisconsin did the first time around was they just got the hell out of the way and let Purdue screw that up. I think Purdue's in a very difficult position. Obviously, Johnny Davis got hot. That was part of the Purdue screwing it up because the turnovers really got Johnny Davis going. The defensive breakdowns really contributed to a lot of that. I think Purdue's in a different place right now than they were back then. I don't know if they have to win out to win the Big Ten because I think Wisconsin's going to be really hard pressed to win at Rutgers. But I think that the bottom line here is Purdue just needs to, shoot a little bit better, and everything else needs to stay in place. Jaden Ivey is going to be fine. I think he was the one probably who needed a day off more than anybody here. Once he regains his form, if Purdue can stop turning the ball over, they're going to be fine.
Yeah. Interesting because in a game that was this afternoon, like I said, Illinois, Michigan State, a big one because you need everybody to get another loss to be able to win it outright. Obviously, as Purdue's sitting there with 4 losses, like it seems like half of the upper echelon of the Big Ten, and that's what's going to be a storyline there. Seeding is important, and we obviously Big Ten tournament seeding too. If Purdue wins it outright, obviously it'll be the number 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament here in a couple of weeks. But yet that also is I guess you look at that and you say, gosh, another meat grinder, and that just I guess dealing with the whole notion that the Big Ten. Purdue will be better off in the NCAA tournament because it doesn't have to face Big Ten teams. And I'll start with you, Tom, just in terms of that meat grinder, which is this league, is tough. And how important is that Big Ten tournament? I guess to get a number 1 seed, you need to get probably to the finals. But it's still another example of the grinder that is this league.
I don't think the Big Ten tournament will matter one iota for Purdue. I've never been a big fan of those events. It seems like it's all about trying to sneak some other team in the NCAA tournament every year. It's like, can Iowa win enough games to get in the tournament? There's always some storyline like that. And I think the NCAA bracket's pretty well set by the time you get that deep into the season. Again, I just don't think it's going to matter that much for Purdue, honestly. That's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if I just can't imagine. It just seems absurd that you can play for 3.5 months and then all of a sudden have everything undone by 1 loss in March in the Big Ten tournament. I just think, again, the events for the most part for those top level teams, those conference tournaments don't matter much. Sure, you want to do well, but you can spin it any way you want. For years, the Big Ten didn't have a tournament, and they thought, well, that was a reason why they didn't do good in March. And you say, well, we got ground down in our conference tournament. That's why we didn't do good in the NCAA tournament, whatever you want. But just finish the season strong if you're Purdue. Again, it's nice to win the regular season title. I think that's got a lot more heft to it and a lot more weight to it than these conference tournament titles that, again, you get rewarded for getting hot for 2 or 3 days and suddenly you get an automatic NCAA bid. It makes no sense, but I digress on my soapbox with that. So Purdue, again, we'll find out what happens in March, right? I think we all want to get to March and we want to see what happens. And we know the warts Purdue has. Can it contain the dribble? There's going to be some awfully athletic teams in the NCAA tournament. And Brian said the team's getting better defensively, and it certainly is going to get tested, and it's going to be fun to see how deep the run is. Some people don't think we put too much emphasis on what happens in March. Well, that's college basketball, right? I think it boils down to the NCAA tournament and how did you do then? And again, this is going to be one met with a lot of expectations for Purdue, and I know a lot of fans are excited and eager to see what happens.
You look at that, and I know, Brian, you've mentioned that seeding, number 1 seed, number 2 seed, whatever that is, it's not a be all and end all. Though I selfishly like the idea of playing in Indianapolis and playing in Chicago if you get that opportunity, and there's even brackets out there that produce a number 2 seed in having that opportunity. You still holding to the same thought that it doesn't really matter that much to where you go, or whether you're a 2 seed or a 1 seed, except for being a 1 seed is a prestigious thing, I guess.
Yeah, the best team doesn't always win the NCAA tournament, as we well know. Seeding matters, but only to a point. I think what matters the most is matchups and hot or cold shooting, and I think that's the randomness of the NCAA tournament is one of the really intriguing, but also maddening things about college basketball. That's why I think this year the Big Ten tournament does matter for Purdue, because when you have a team like this and you have an opportunity to win championships, you know. But I think that it's probably oversimplification to say that, you know, Purdue is going to go as far in the NCAA tournament as the three-pointer takes it. But I think there's something to say for that in terms of how many Purdue's making, but also how many your opponents are making. It's like running into the wrong pitching staff in the baseball postseason. Back in the day, the Atlanta Braves could have gotten in as the worst seed, but do you want to see John Smoltz, Greg Maddux, and Tom Glavine in a 5-game series, in a 7-game series? No. It's going to come down to shooting. But the reality is that we're already talking about the NCAA tournament here, when Purdue's got much more urgent business ahead of it here. I think that's been part of the conversation around Purdue, at least, has been a little bit too postseason centric.
Yeah.
Because Purdue's fans are so Final Four hungry. Understandably, this is, you know, arguably your best shot, one of your 2 or 3 best shots at least at it. And I think Purdue's got a chance here to win a Big Ten regular season title, got a chance to win a Big Ten tournament title. And I think that stuff's still really important. What comes after that, you know, is still a few weeks away. But the important part for Purdue right now is to just keep getting better with these last couple of games, be the best version of yourself when it matters the most here. Your seeding, it would be great to play through Chicago, to play through Indianapolis, to have your fans there. But, you know, Purdue played a Big Ten tournament game and a NCAA tournament game last year in Indianapolis with fans there, and they lost both of them. So Purdue played Villanova a few years back in Hartford in a de facto Villanova home game, and Villanova got crushed. So I think that stuff matters, but I think there's a certain neutrality to NCAA tournament environments that overcomes where however many fans a team has there. So I think that stuff's important, but only to a point. I think you'd rather be in Chicago or Indy than have to get on a plane and hit different time zones. Obviously, things like that, but I think that matters only to a point, really.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think Matt Painter and staff have got to compartmentalize this deal. Like you said, sounds simple, but it is one game at a time. And if the better they do that, might actually have the effect of taking some of the pressure off. And maybe that pressure is by, as Tom talked about, and you both have talked about, is the 42 years since Purdue's been to the Final Four, and that angst that's out there, and whether that how much that plays into the 18 to 22-year-old's mind, hard to know for sure. I mean, I'm sure it does play.
Not one bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I think a little. I promise you, because these guys, they live for the now. I don't think Jaden Ivey's too concerned about the fact that Purdue last went to the Final Four when he was negative 20 years old. I don't think that's reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
what the reality is we're talking about something here that is not even on Purdue's mind. I promise you that, because that's kind of what we do here. We talk about things that are not the most clearest and present challenge.
Yeah, and I think that if the coaching staff's doing the job of what they're supposed to be doing, you have to find a way to focus on what's going on now. And you're right. I don't think it matters. They barely know who Joe Barry Carroll is anyway. So I get that. And I think that will be an interesting deal. I'm sure it gets talked about among students, just the fact that they want to go to the Final Four, not necessarily the length of time it's been. All right. Another discussion topic as our second one will be just Tom wrote a story this week on Purdue plans, or at least in thoughts that they may build a tunnel from the football performance complex to the north end and have it as a part of a renovation to Ross-Ade Stadium. We expect to have some announcement on what specifically that will be in the spring. And I guess it brings, we had Matt Folk on our Gold and Black Live yesterday, and the CEO of Purdue for Life, and talked about just the future of college football, the money that may be there, what impact that makes, the future of the playoffs, all these things tie into what kind of investments schools are going to be making in their facilities. And one thing that Matt talked about, and not that it's anything new, is that, we're going to focus on as much the student athlete experience and making that, in the world of NIL and transfer portal, making this the best situation it can. Tom, we don't know what a crystal ball we know is going to be. Then we know the television contract in 24 will, or whenever that is, will make an impact. We understand the playoffs are not going to expand until 2026. So that may slow down this whole idea of the 32-team conference or 32 teams being in their own league. But how do you disseminate it? Or is it better to take the same approach as basketball and say, well, let's just wait and see what happens? How do you view this?
Guess I'm not sure what you asked, but I'll just say, first of all, I'm just really disappointed that they couldn't come together and get this playoff expanded sooner. It just continues to amaze me how college football can't get out of its own way, and they can't collectively work together here. And it's just disappointing. And I guess I don't see it changing. So we're going to have to put up with this 14 playoff for 4 more seasons because of some stubbornness of some conferences led by the ACC.
Yeah.
There's talk already about $1 billion television contract. I think this is the last year, the Big Ten's deal. They're the next major conference coming up. And again, sounds like they're going to break the bank. It'd be very interesting, I think, to see how many different bidders are involved, how this contract is split up among networks. Is there going to be a streaming service involved? So it's going to be, again, fascinating to see how this thing looks when the negotiations are signed, sealed, and delivered for the conference. But bottom line, there's going to be a lot of money for these schools. And Purdue's pockets are going to get flushed with cash. And football-wise, from everything I've heard, these Ross-Ade renovations are going to move forward here. More so in phases, maybe 2 or 3 phases, it sounds like. Not sure what's going to get done when, what timetables are. I'm sure maybe we're going to learn more about that in the near future. But the tunnel had been sort of buzzed about for a while. Somebody told me once it was maybe going to be called the Tiller Tunnel if they could get Tiller's old players to pony up. But it'd be kind of a cool thing, I think. Right now, it's a real circuitous route for the players to the field. They got to walk through the Mollenkoff Center, come out the other end, walk up those stairs past the big Boilermakers statue, cross the street into Ross-Ade Stadium. So, again, a tunnel would be cool from just, I think, from an event standpoint, too, for players to walk through. And we see it in Nebraska. We see it in Wisconsin. And that could be a nice little element for Purdue. And, I guess if I had a wish list, if I was Jeff Brom, I think I would like to have some type of a dining facility too. If not in the Kozich Football Performance Complex, there's probably not room there adjacent, maybe where that gift shop's at there in the northeast corner of the Ross-Ade Stadium. So again, I'm sure they've got all types of ideas well beyond a tunnel and a dining facility. It's going to be fun to see, guys. I think our readers and viewers love facilities news. I love facilities news. And it's going to be fun to see what's cooking as far as Ross-Ade Stadium's future goes, because there's a lot of untapped potential. I think we all can agree on that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, I agree. And there was talk, of course, the dining facility was a part of the original, as I understand, the Kozich plans. Got scrubbed because of money, even though they spent $70 million on the deal. So I think that is something that could potentially happen. But I think the one thing that slowing down of the playoff change, while I agree with you that college football needs a czar or some way to work together, but I think it is an indicator and it's a timing issue in my view. You have 2026. If that doesn't change there, that tells me that this super conference idea isn't going to happen overnight. And it may slow that appearance, because if you're Purdue, you're not in that 32-team deal. And if that happens, and I think what you're saying, Tom, I don't put words in your mouth, is that Purdue in the Big Ten is going to continue to exist where it is, and not that Purdue's a bottom feeder, but it's not a blue blood program. That college football may continue to exist like it's going to for another 10 or 15 years, and I know even with what Matt Folk said, that is certainly on their thought process as they move forward. But Brian, I'll ask you. I mean, again, better to take it one day at a time, but the money there is going to be critical for programs like Purdue moving forward to be able to try to find a way to compete not only in the college football world, but everything else that goes with it.
Yeah, I'll just say, if you guys are expecting the power conferences in football to work together for an amicable solution, I don't know what you've been watching the last couple of years, because I think last summer was, the clearest cut example possible that all these conferences are competitors. They don't want to work together. They want the most money possible, and I think that's a big part of the alliance. I think is they were just trying to check the SEC's power here, and if that means standing in the way of expansion of the playoff, that's exactly what they're going to do. It's going to happen eventually.
Yeah, no doubt.
I don't know about this whole super conference thing. That to me still just, the individual conferences still have so much power that I just can't imagine a day where the Big Ten is going to say, or is going to be a willing participant in Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State just leaving for some sort of leviathan of a super conference and then leaving everybody else behind. I understand that this is an unpredictable landscape at which the only thing that matters is money, but I just really have to suspend disbelief to see that happening. Now, if there's something like everybody stays in their conferences, but there's maybe only 25 teams that have access to the playoff, I don't know how you would pull that off. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I could see that maybe being a situation where the playoff becomes a little bit more exclusive. I don't know why you wouldn't want a Cincinnati in the playoff, personally. I understand that, they don't have the following a lot of these other programs do, but I just think that it would make college football less interesting. It would make it more lucrative, but I think it would make it less interesting too if this were just a 10-team game of musical chairs between Ohio State, Michigan, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, etc. I don't know if college football wants interesting or if they just want lucrative. Probably the latter, but I do think lucrative and interesting do go hand in hand. So I think college football at some point is going to have to, come to its senses before really talking about something as exclusionary as this hypothetical we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think the hard thing there, though, in what you say is, how do you come to your senses if you don't have any somebody that's trying to direct traffic? And when you have the Southeast
conferences are going to have to, work together in some regard. Now, I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Yeah,
but the whole point, again, of the alliance is that the SEC can't just do whatever it wants, because there's going to be other people at that table with, kind of putting up a unified front. So at some point in time, it kind of turns into Congress, where if you want to get something done, you have to work together.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is a terrible example, but
yeah. Well, I just look at this.
You can make a lot more money working together.
Yeah.
If everybody wasn't so worried about their little piece of the pie. I mean, I always go back to the NFL and how they make it work together. I'm sure the Dallas Cowboys certainly probably don't like the fact the Indianapolis Colts get the same check they do for national TV. They make a lot of money working together, and for some reason, college football can't figure that out. And it just seems so absurd if you applied all this to the NFL. You imagine like these divisions fight with each other and stuff. Having a committee that picks your playoff teams, the whole thing is just all absurd. But anyway, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. I think college football is becoming a regional sport. You're lopping off large parts of the country, like the West Coast in particular. Just become a provincial sport. Smaller and smaller areas of the country are really involved and invested. I mean, It's I just think something has to change. More access has to be given to the playoff to give these schools, give these fans hope. Aside from just going to the Micron PC Bowl, a 12-team playoff would allow most of these major Power 5 conferences, I think, a chance, if everything's clicking for them in a certain year, to get a bid. I think Purdue could get a bid in a 12-team playoff. Right now, probably not in a 14 playoff. And that's part of the charm of the NCAA basketball tournament, right? It's a Cinderella, watching those teams get in, seeing the upsets. And right now, there's none of that in college football. It's just the four power schools amongst a handful of select that are always in the dance, and the rest of the country just shrugs its shoulders. It's just like we're supposed to stand and applaud for a millionaire who just made another $1 million. Hey, that's great. We're so happy for you, man. Another $1 million. And just like Alabama, I mean, it just got to open up and involve more schools, give more schools and programs and fan bases hope. And I can go on and on. These playoff games should be on campus as well. The fact that we want to play those on neutral sites is just absurd, what Gene Smith said. It just hammers home more the craziness of college football and I guess the little provincial leaders it has.
Yeah, I think you have the problem is there's just not enough drama of and I understand Cincinnati got in this year, but it's still the same teams every year, basically. Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, I know LSU, whatever, but and that's what I think college football has got to figure out a way to maybe a 12-team playoff does that, but so that we're not really, there's no drama, who we know who's going to be there in relative terms. So, all right, Brian, go ahead.
The last point to make there too is for a Purdue to have more access to the playoff. I think that the powers that be need to want that. And I always say this about college basketball, like North Carolina had an academic scandal in basketball, as you guys will recall, fake classes. It was not punishable under NCAA rules because the NCAA's policy is for academic misconduct issues to be handled by the school and not the NCAA. That is the NCAA writing those rules. And the NCAA is not some third-party bunch of suits off in Indy. The NCAA is the university presidents, listening to the university athletic directors, listening to their coaches. The NCAA does what the presidents want. If the presidents wanted North Carolina getting in trouble for academic misconduct, the rules would be written that way. But the reality is that college basketball makes so much money off people like North Carolina. The TV deals are so dependent on brands like North Carolina that people don't want them getting punished. I mean, if the rampant impropriety in basketball recruiting over the years, that stuff, everybody knows about that. Just nobody ever did anything about it because people were making money off the people who were breaking the rules. That might be a bad example, but what I'm saying is everybody in college football right now is making money off of Ohio State playing Alabama because people watch it. And I don't know necessarily if the powers that be are going to sit here and be like, I think they do want a 12-team playoff because it's more inventory for TV more than anything, but I don't think it would be some kind of altruistic movement to say we need to be more fair about our champion. We need to let people like Purdue and Cincinnati and West Virginia have access to this too. I think it's simply about inventory. It's simply about if we can go from having 4 playoff games to 8 playoff games, that's leverage for our next TV negotiation. I don't think this has anything to do with anything competitive or the integrity of your championship. I think it, like everything else in college sports, it has to do with one thing, and that is money.
On that thought, we'll continue that. I'm sure this will be a discussion that we will have over time, but it is an interesting deal. The timing of all this will be fascinating to see it not unravel, but be revealed, I should say. So, all right, guys, thanks so much for your time and all of you that watched and or listened to our Saturday Simulcast. We will be back next week, probably on Sunday, because Purdue will play Michigan State next Saturday at noon, and we'll come back and talk after that. So I want to thank the Union Club Hotel for its sponsorship of this, and also a reminder that a programming note that on Thursday, March 3rd, Brian and I will be over at the at the Boiler Up Bar to have a little bit of discussion about Purdue basketball. Something that will be a continuous topic from now till the end of the NCAA tournament and beyond. So have a great week, everybody. Thanks so much, and we will see you next week on our Saturday Simulcast.